There is a version of you that only shows up above 95 degrees. And this summer, you have been blaming yourself for the things it did. Tonight, I want to give you 3 things. What the heat actually does to your body, and there is a study from this month on that. Why your brain reads that as a fact about your personality, and a way of sorting things that somebody wrote down 2,000 years ago that you can use before you go to sleep. Start with the room. It is 2 in the morning. The fan is running, but all it is doing is moving hot air from one side of the room to the other. The sheet is stuck to the back of your leg, and you are lying there running the same sentence again, the one you said to somebody around 6 o'clock, in a tone you did not plan. That is where I want to begin, not with the sentence, with the room. Because something happened this summer, and it was not a mood. At the end of June, the National Weather Service had about 180 million people, close to half of this country, under major or extreme heat risk. By the 8th of July, 44 deaths were linked to the heat. Atlantic City hit 106 degrees on the 4th of July, tying the hottest temperature ever recorded there. Salt Lake City hit 109 on the 12th. That is not a hot week. That is the hottest day that city has ever had. 4th of July parades were canceled, not because of rain, because it was dangerous to stand outside. So when I say something went through you this summer, I mean a physical event, at national scale, went through you. It went through me too. I am not describing your feelings. I am describing the weather, and you happen to be inside it. Now here is the study. On the 10th of July, a team led by Yuming Guo and Shanshan Li at Monash University published something in the journal Nature Health. They looked at 2.6 million warm season hospital admissions across 852 locations over 20 years, and they found that sustained exposure to extreme heat, the kind you get in a heat wave, was associated with a higher risk of being hospitalized for mental and behavioral disorders. I want to be careful with that, because it matters. 3 things I have to tell you about it. The data is from Brazil, Canada, Chile, and New Zealand. It is not American data. Second, they did not publish how big the increase was, so I am not going to give you a number. If anybody gives you a number on this, they made it up. And third, the word the researchers used is associated, not caused. I am going to keep using their word, not a stronger one. What is left after all that honesty is still worth having. It is a direction, and it is a mechanism. And the mechanism they point to first is sleep. So let me tell you what the heat is doing to your sleep, because this is the part you can actually feel. To fall asleep, your core body temperature has to drop. It falls about half a degree to a degree Celsius below your daytime level, and it keeps falling while you are under. That drop is not a side effect of sleeping. That drop is the signal that starts it. And the way your body makes that drop happen is by dumping heat out through your skin, mostly your hands and your feet. That is why sticking a foot out from under the blanket works. You are not being fussy. You are using the exhaust. Now put that room back in your head. 90-something degrees at 2 in the morning. The exhaust is blocked. There is nowhere for the heat to go. So the drop does not come, or it comes late and small. Which means the hot night is not you lying awake because you are upset. It is your body not receiving the one signal it needs to let go. Do that 4 nights in a row. 5. And the thing you normally spend on patience is empty, not used up by you, never refilled. I think that is the part almost nobody says out loud. We talk about willpower like it is a character trait you either have or you do not. Most of the time, it is just a battery, and the heat unplugged the charger. So the heat did something. That is established. But that is not what this video is about. What this video is about is the conclusion you drew from it. In 1974, 2 psychologists, Donald Dutton and Arthur Aaron, published an experiment in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. It is one of those studies that gets taught in every intro course, and the part that usually gets remembered is not the part that matters tonight. Here is the setup. They had 2 bridges. One was a high, narrow suspension bridge, the kind that moves under you and makes your hands find the rail. The other was low, solid, boring. In the middle of each bridge stood a woman, a researcher, who stopped the men crossing and asked them to fill out a short test. The men who crossed the frightening bridge were much more likely to contact her afterwards. That is the famous result, and it usually gets told as a story about attraction. It is not really about attraction. It is about accounting. Their bodies were doing something. Fast heart, tight breath, hands not steady. That was the bridge. But nobody's brain says, "My heart is going because I just walked across a terrifying bridge." The brain does not narrate that way. The brain says, "I like her." Your body produces the state. Your mind then goes looking for a reason, and it takes the nearest one that fits. So, sit with that for a second, and then bring it back to July. Your body is in a state. Bad sleep, high core temperature, short fuse, no appetite, a kind of low, flat irritation that sits behind your eyes all day. That is the heat. That is the bridge. But what does your brain reach for? Not the thermometer. It almost never reaches for the thermometer. It reaches for the nearest story about you. "I am off lately. I have no patience anymore. Something is wrong with me. I used to be better than this." And I want to be clear about what I am not saying. I am not saying the thing you snapped about did not happen. I am not saying you were right. I am saying there was a second explanation available that night, and it never got considered, because your brain had already taken the one within reach. That is not a mistake you made. That is how the reaching works, in all of us. And this is not me stretching a psychology experiment to fit a heat wave. The connection is already in the literature. Craig Anderson at Iowa State has spent decades on temperature and aggression. He calls it the heat hypothesis. Hot temperatures raise aggression, and the way they do it is by directly increasing feelings of hostility and indirectly increasing aggressive thoughts. Not aggressive acts necessarily, thoughts. The heat changes what comes to mind. And when Anderson laid out the models for how this works, he listed 5 of them. The third one is called excitation transfer, or misattribution. So the idea that you take arousal the heat produced and read it as something else, that is not my metaphor. That is one of the standard explanations in the field. I should also tell you the part that is less tidy. Anderson himself writes that field studies show this effect clearly, while laboratory studies are inconsistent. That is his own summary of his own area. I am not going to pretend this is settled physics. It is a real effect that is hard to reproduce in a room with a clipboard, which is true of a lot of things about people. So put those 2 pieces together. The heat is doing something real to your body, and your mind is filing that something under a heading about your character. Which means the verdict you have been carrying around since June was reached with a column missing. Now, somebody sorted this out a very long time ago, and he was unusually blunt about it. Epictetus opens his handbook, the Enchiridion, by dividing everything that exists into 2 columns. Things that are up to you, things that are not up to you. And in the column of things that are not up to you, the very first item he writes down is the body. I want you to notice how strange that is. 2,000 years before anyone measured a core temperature, before there was a word for thermoregulation, a former slave in Rome sat down and put your body in the column marked not yours. So, the short fuse at 98 degrees, the hour you spent awake at 2, the way your skin felt, he already filed all of that. It is in the other column. It is weather happening in a body. And in the column of things that are up to you, he put something specific. Your judgment, your opinion. The Greek word is hypolepsis, the view you take of a thing. That is the part that is yours, not the state, the reading of the state. But I have to be careful here, because this is exactly where Stoicism gets misquoted into something cold and useless. This is not me telling you it does not matter. It is not me telling you to let it go. If you snapped at someone, that happened. They felt it. If you owe an apology, the heat does not cancel the apology. Epictetus is not handing you a note from the nurse. He is separating 2 things that have been glued together in your head. Apologizing is one thing. Sentencing yourself is a different thing, and you can do the first one without doing the second. That is the whole move. I am not taking your responsibility away from you. I am adding a column you did not have. So here is what I actually want you to do with this, and it is small. Before you draw a conclusion about who you are, fill in 3 boxes. What is the temperature right now? How many hours have you slept this week? Not last night, this week. And when did you last actually eat something? Then read your conclusion again. I want to be honest about what that does, because I do not want to oversell it. It will not make the conclusion disappear. You will still think, I am off lately. What it does is change what kind of statement that is. A verdict sits there and becomes part of who you think you are. A hypothesis gets checked. That is the entire difference. And it is enough. I am still working on this one, by the way. Last week, I was in a room that was about 98 degrees, and I got disproportionately angry at an email. And then I spent most of a night deciding what that said about me. I did not check the temperature until the next morning. I knew all of this while I was doing it. Which is why I think the variable here is not intensity, it is frequency. You do not have to do this well. You have to do it often enough that it starts arriving before the verdict does. So, that version of you that only shows up above 95 degrees. That is not the real you underneath. It is also not fake. It is you with the cooling system blocked and the battery never charged. It is a body running out of margin. That is all it is. And here is the thing about it. The weather leaves. In September, the nights get long again and cool and quiet, and that version goes with them. But the verdict does not leave on its own. Verdicts do not evaporate. Somebody has to go back and withdraw them, and the only person withstanding to do that is you. So tonight, before you decide what kind of person you are, check the thermometer. It is not an excuse. It is just the missing column